Before we start, in what year did the United States federal government first mandate electronic logging devices in commercial trucks, making it impossible to falsify driving hours records? Put your answer below. The answer tells you how recently this industry was still operating largely on paper records that any driver could alter with a pen. Every regulation in commercial trucking exists because something happened on a real road that made it necessary. A bridge was struck, a driver fell asleep, a load shifted, brakes failed. The law that followed is the engineering and legal response to that event written in regulatory language. Incident 1, the Surface Transportation Assistance Act, 1982. Before 1982, individual U.S. states set their own commercial vehicle dimension and weight limits. A truck legal in one state could be illegal the moment it crossed a state line. Carriers operating interstate routes navigated a patchwork of 50 different regulatory frameworks that added cost, complexity, and inconsistency to every cross-country freight movement. The Surface Transportation Assistance Act of 1982 standardized the 102-inch, 2.59-meter trailer width and the 53-foot, 16.15-meter trailer length on the interstate highway system across all states. It removed the legal patchwork that had governed commercial vehicles since the interstate highway system was built. Every 53-foot dry van on every American highway today, and there are approximately 6 million of them, operates under dimensions standardized by that single piece of legislation. The trailer series on this channel starts with the dry van because of what that act made possible. Incident 2. The mandating of air brakes on commercial vehicles. Hydraulic brakes, the system used in passenger cars, rely on fluid pressure to actuate brake mechanisms. In a heavy vehicle, the heat generated by repeated braking vaporizes the hydraulic fluid, a phenomenon called brake fade, rendering the brakes ineffective. The heavier the vehicle, the more heat generated and the more severe the fade. Air brakes replace hydraulic fluid with compressed air. They have a fundamental safety advantage that hydraulic systems do not. They are fail-safe by default. A hydraulic brake system that loses pressure loses braking capability entirely. An air brake system that loses pressure automatically applies the spring brakes, the parking brakes, through the spring force stored in the brake chambers. A truck that loses air pressure stops rather than rolling freely. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance documents air brake violations as consistently among the top reasons for placing commercial vehicles out of service at roadside inspections. The technology has been mandatory on heavy commercial vehicles for decades, precisely because the alternative was documented to fail catastrophically under the load and heat conditions of commercial operation. Incident 3. The ELD Mandate, 2019. For most of the history of hours of service regulation, the compliance tool was a paper logbook. A driver recorded their duty status in 15-minute increments on a grid. The paper logbook could be falsified. A driver who wanted to exceed legal driving hours wrote different hours than they actually drove. Enforcement required inspectors to cross-reference logbook entries against fuel receipts, toll records, and delivery timestamps, a process that caught deliberate falsification only when the physical evidence was obvious and inconsistent. The electronic logging device mandate took full effect in December 2019. An ELD connects directly to the truck's engine control module and records driving time automatically. It cannot be edited after the fact. The engine records when it runs. A driver cannot record 8 hours of driving when the ELD shows 11 hours of engine operation. The ELD mandate was contested for years before implementation. The Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association challenged it in federal court. The Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals upheld it in 2011. Full enforcement began December 2019. The quiz answer is 2019. Incident 4. The mandating of ABS on heavy trucks. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration estimated that mandating electronic stability control, which incorporates ABS functionality, on heavy trucks would prevent approximately 56 fatal crashes and 562 injury crashes per year in the United States. That estimate implies those crashes were occurring at exactly that frequency before the technology was mandated. ABS prevents wheel lockup during emergency braking. A locked wheel slides rather than rolls. A sliding tire generates less braking force than a rolling tire and cannot generate any lateral cornering force. The vehicle goes straight regardless of steering input. On a semi-truck, a locked rear trailer axle creates the conditions for a jackknife because the locked wheels drag straight while the tractor continues to push forward and turn. ABS has been mandatory on new heavy trucks in the European Union since 1991, nearly 30 years before the US equivalent mandate fully took effect. The NTSB documented jackknife incidents throughout the period when ABS was available but not mandated as preventable with technology that existed but was not required. Incident 5. The Cargo Securement Rule Revision, 2002. In 2002, the FMCSA completely revised the cargo securement regulations under 49 CFR 393, following years of documented accidents caused by shifting, falling, and improperly secured freight. The revision introduced the working load requiring that the aggregate working load limit of all tie-downs meet a specified percentage of the cargo weight, and added commodity-specific requirements for the highest-risk cargo types. Steel coils received their own dedicated securement requirements in that revision. A steel coil that breaks its securement on a highway and begins rolling is not a freight loss incident. The NTSB investigation reports of accidents caused by unsecured steel coils document fatalities in following vehicles from coils that traveled hundreds of meters after leaving the trailer. The FMCSA documents that unsecured cargo contributes to approximately 25,000 crashes per year in the United States. The 2002 revision was the direct regulatory response to years of those incidents being investigated, documented, and attributed to inadequate securement standard. Incident 6. The Commercial Driver's License Act, 1986. Before 1986, commercial driver licensing in the United States was a state-by-state system with no federal standards. Requirements, testing procedures, and disqualification rules varied between states. A driver disqualified in one state for a serious violation could obtain a commercial license in another state and continue operating. There was no national database of commercial driver violations, and no mechanism for one state to know about a disqualification issued by another. The Commercial Motor Vehicle Safety Act of 1986 created the federal CDL program, 3 license classes, a standardized knowledge and skills testing framework, and a national commercial driver information system that tracked violations across state lines. A driver disqualified in Texas could no longer simply move to Nevada and get a new license. The act was a direct response to documented cases of drivers with serious violation histories in multiple states who were still legally licensed to operate commercial vehicles because the states had no way to communicate about those histories. Incident 7. The Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, 2020. Before January 2020, a commercial driver who tested positive for drugs or alcohol at one carrier could resign, apply to a different carrier, and begin driving again without the new employer knowing about the positive test. Pre-employment drug testing was required, but it tested for current substance presence, not employment history. A driver who completed a return-to-duty process at one carrier and then left that carrier carried no visible record of the violation to the next employer. The FMCSA's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, which became mandatory for employer queries in January 2020, is a federal database that records all drug and alcohol violations by CDL holders. Employers must query the database before hiring any new driver and annually for all current drivers. A violation recorded in the clearinghouse follows the driver regardless of which state their license was issued in or which employer they are working for. The clearinghouse database recorded over 100,000 drug and alcohol violations in its first year of full operation, violations that in the pre-clearinghouse era would have been invisible to subsequent employers. Incident 8. The Bridge Formula. The Federal Bridge Formula, officially Federal Bridge Formula B, exists because of a documented relationship between how vehicle weight is distributed across axles and the stress that distribution causes to bridge structures. Before the Bridge Formula was codified in federal law, the standard weight limit was a gross vehicle weight maximum without specific requirements for how that weight was distributed across axle groups. A vehicle could legally concentrate its maximum gross weight on a small number of closely spaced axles, creating a load intensity on the bridge structure at that point that exceeded what the structure was designed to carry, even though the total weight was within the legal limit. The Bridge Formula calculates the maximum weight permitted on any group of consecutive axles based on the number of axles and the distance between the outermost axles of the group. More axles spaced further apart distribute the load over a longer section of bridge, reducing the peak stress at any single point. The formula is published in 23 CFR, Part 658, and enforced at every weigh station in the country. The National Bridge Inventory, maintained by the Federal Highway Administration, currently documents that 7.5% of United States bridges are classified as structurally deficient. The bridge formula is what stands between the current 7.5% and a significantly higher number. 8 incidents, 8 changes. The patchwork of state dimensions that the STAA standardized in 1982. The hydraulic brakes that failed under heavy load and were replaced by air. The paper logbook that any driver could alter, and the ELD that made alteration impossible. The jackknife incidents that ABS was designed to prevent. The unsecured steel coils that rewrote the cargo securement regulations. The CDL that replaced 50 different state systems with one national standard. The drug test that followed a driver to their next job through the clearinghouse. And the bridge formula that distributes weight across axles to protect infrastructure that was built before modern trucks existed. Every regulation covered in this video started as an investigation report. Every investigation report started as an incident on a real road.